do small tests. They're hugely valuable. But also, if you want big results, then sometimes you do just have to make big changes.
Hello, I am here today with Dan, who is the co-founder here at PPC Geeks. How are you doing?
Hi, Chris. I'm very well, thank you. Very well. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. So today, I thought Dan would be the perfect person to talk about testing because Dan definitely has a great background in testing over 2 decades now. We're revealing our ages there a bit.
Yeah.
So testing is one of the key tenets of digital marketing and doing it properly. So we just thought that would be a great way to explore both at a high level conceptually what testing means and why it's so important, and maybe some of the ideas of the kind of things people should be testing and what they should look out for. So to that end, what does testing mean to you in a digital ads context? What's it all about?
Okay, thanks, Chris. Well, the whole idea and the basis around testing for me is the opportunity to be continually getting better. Obviously, the one thing that can happen with any kind of marketing really is kind of just getting stuck in a rut and just the same things happen day in, day out. Whereas testing gives you the opportunity to be able to expand and just continually getting better.
Yeah, exactly. And the beauty of digital marketing is that you can test and measure what's going on. So there's this old saying in the old school marketing, half of my marketing works, but I don't know which half.
Yeah,
and it was when it was all billboards and adverts and things like that.
Newspapers.
Test. Yeah. You could test in newspapers with direct response and having different response addresses and codes back in the day when you have mail order and stuff. But that is the beauty of digital marketing, is that you do get that data to test on. So what's important when it comes to testing and why do we do it? Things like making sure our money's going in the right place, but also we need to be continually improving. Why do we test for our clients, and why should everyone be testing no matter the size of their account?
Right, good question there, Chris. I would say the main reason to be testing is obviously to be getting better. You want to look at it as almost like a marginal gains kind of win, so you get a compounding effect over the days, the weeks, the months, the years. Obviously, Google Ads, for instance, has changed a lot over the past 2-3 years, or getting on for 20 years that we've been around it. And over that time, there used to be a lot more manual testing that we used to have to do on just a standard day-to-day basis. Now that their algorithms and machine learning and AI just handle quite a lot of certain bits of testing, but the main reason you want to do testing is to be able to continually get better. It really is kind of that simple. And there's lots of different aspects that you can test in and around. So everything from budgets through to where you're sending people, how you're finding people, all the way from like the keyword to the ad group to the campaign kind of level, moving into like the image assets, the actual text that you've got in your adverts. There is so many different things to test and be continually getting better at. So one way I try to describe it is, say every month you're running 10 different little tests on different things. Each one of them might only have a marginal gain of, say, a 0.5% increase in, say, your conversions or conversion rate or your average order value. Now, that in isolation by itself over that 1 month, it could be best described as like a little blip. You're not really going to notice it. But when you're compounding those and you're continually making more and more improvements each month off the back of the better results, then, over the 6 month, the 12 month, the 18 month period, then you're really starting to get much larger gains, if you will.
I always think there's a lot that you can do when you're managing digital marketing campaigns, but I always think it comes down to 2 key elements. One is it's not a set and forget. So there's so much changes with competitors and new services that come along, and within a business, if products go out of stock and stuff like that. So there's that constant chipping away maintenance. It's almost like a muscle. If you don't use it, it will atrophy. It'll work a bit for a short while and then it won't work. And so you've got to keep working at it. That's the maintenance side. But then every business wants to get better. Every business wants to grow. And just to stay afloat, you have to be testing the new things because digital marketing moves so fast. So testing is a key pillar of what we do and anyone doing digital marketing should do, because you can't just maintain things and set and forget them. You do need to be constantly improving. So when it comes to testing, what kind of thing, before you even start saying, what am I going to test, or what do we need ready for testing? What kind of things do you need to have in place? No matter what you're doing, what do you need to have ready to start thinking about your tests?
Well, without a shadow of a doubt, you're obviously going to need tracking. You're going to need to know what your budgets are.
Yeah.
Without the basic principles, then you're setting yourself up to fail.
And so many people don't have that tracking in place, do they?
Yeah. No, obviously, one of the things that we do for potential clients is do an audit, as obviously you'll know, and probably the audience will know. And we still find tracking issues on audits that we're doing this week. Yeah, it is a very prevalent problem. And also there's been a lot of changes in tracking and moving forward throughout the rest of the year. With more and more kind of a cookieless world, tracking is just going to become even more of an issue.
Yeah. And the key thing is with the tracking, obviously you want to track what you're testing, but you need to have been tracking to have data to reference again. So, because otherwise, if you don't know what your conversion rate is, for example, and then you start testing, what are you benchmarking against? You always need that benchmark. The other thing is budgets, of course. So it's a key thing with budgets to understand how much you want to allocate towards testing, because we always say this thing, you can't make an omelette without breaking some eggs. And it's the same with digital marketing. You want to allocate some sort of budget to, see what works and what doesn't. And testing doesn't always work. It's always a reality. What kind of rule of thumb would you recommend? Obviously, it's client specific, but for how much budget to allocate to testing?
Well, that is a very good question, Chris. And I'd say there's also different elements within tracking. 100% have a specific budget just for testing wild things or new things, maybe. So maybe new platforms, but there's also just a lot of testing that you can do. That doesn't necessarily require a different type of budget, different ad copy, different assets, etc. But would be very, very business specific and hard to put a specific number on what a budget should be outside of the normal average everyday. One thing I'll just heavily suggest on that, and which we obviously do for our clients, but for somebody else who maybe is new to this, would be to very much do your homework, do your research, make sure you've got your customer personas nailed down, make sure you know where the eyes of your customers are. By all means, you go and spend millions of pounds advertising on some platform where your clients just aren't within that buying cycle. So as long as it's really just the case doing your homework and making the best guesses, having your tracking set up in place, you know what good looks like, and you set KPIs, and then you can run it forwards. Start small, work up from there would be my general rule of thumb.
I mean, it's a great point I often forget, actually, is that a lot of what you can test, you don't have to spend extra budget on.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
I mean, a rough rule of thumb for a reasonable size of account, depending on the client's goals and aspirations to grow, would be maybe 10, 15%, wouldn't it? If it was budget wise and stuff that if you're spending that amount of money, you want it to work, but you're okay if 10% of your budget doesn't work because it's trying to make this extra money. But I think that's a good point to come on to the different. Let's look into the different types of testing you can do with digital advertising, and it'd be worth saying which ones cost money and which don't. So we've got a few ideas of things that we normally do testing on. So something that people may or may not have heard of. I feel like this is something a lot of people have heard of, but don't actually understand how it works. And I know it's something you've got a lot of experience with. So what's A/B testing? When do you use it? And how's a simple way to set it up?
Yeah, good question. Okay, so it can be, I can expand out on this a long way, but I'll try and keep it as succinct as possible. So A/B testing is, in theory, is where you have two or at least two different variants of something which you're then splitting traffic to in a randomized pattern to through tracking and having kind of your conversion data to see which one converts at a higher rate, or it could be you could run a test for many different things. We'll tend to obviously be very specific to the outcomes because, we're a performance agency, aren't we? Performance marketing agency. So, but yeah, it's in its very essence, A/B testing is where you run in parallel 2 different copies of something, and eventually over a period of time, or when it gets statistically significant numbers, then one will come out as a winner. On that, you don't want to. You want to make sure it's significant with regards to how many people have kind of viewed the page. So say if you only got a page where 100 people a month see it, you're going to want to run that test for a long, long time because you need to be able to get enough data. Otherwise, you get what's called false positives. So say you got 100 people to the page, so that's only 50 to each if you did a 50-50 split, and you say you had 2 conversions on version A. Well, that would make that look like an enormous winner, when actually you just don't have enough traffic to both pages. So we run tests for kind of clients that have done in the past where some clients with lots and lots of traffic, we can run them in a month, but others where it's actually over maybe 4 or 5 months, but also spread across many different campaigns running the same test, because then you can amalgamate so you can basically put all the information together to then find a statistical winner.
Yeah.
Does that answer? Is that just
that's good.
I can keep going, but yeah.
Yeah, there's 2. I mean, there's different things you can. The concept of A/B testing is just that, isn't it? You've got 2 versions of something, and you are seeing which of those 2 versions gets you better results, which in our world is making money, which is in our world is conversions. But then I guess we could talk about the different kinds of things within a digital campaign you can test. So the classic one is a landing page. So you've got 2 variants of a landing page. The old joke used to be people are just changing the colors of buttons. On one page, it's an orange button, one page, it's a blue button. That does, if you've got enough traffic, that does make a difference. Or it could be the images, or it could be where you position testimonials. But you've got 2 essentially the same versions of things. You're changing one element on each and seeing with enough traffic which one garners you more conversions or whatever action you are tracking. Yeah. But then before that, I mean, I think that's the classic example people think about. And it's certainly when we speak to clients or potential clients, that's the kind of thing they want to do. But there's a lot you can do before people even get to your website, isn't there, with digital ads? And that's 100%. Doing different variants of ad copy. But there's some nuances to how you might strategically set that up. So can you tell us about how you might test different elements, descriptions, headlines, and things like that, and why you would do it in that way?
Well, absolutely. Well, unfortunately, I'm going to have to kind of just cast our minds back a few years. So it used to be a very manual process where you'd have two complete different sets of kind of ad copy with different headlines, different descriptions, and they'd be fixed. Google over the past 12, 18 months or so has been very much reworking that, because it was only people who had that deeper level of knowledge like ourselves that could really take advantage of it. Whereas a lot of clients that Google have, 99% of the businesses in the UK will never turn over £1 million. So a lot of the smaller ones would just go in there, set something up, and they just always have the same. So what Google now has ads which, when you're creating them, have many more fields for the different types of, let's say, headlines, and then different lines for descriptions. And then Google, with its own AI, will kind of test those and match those up to find and to flag winners. Obviously, I'm a bit of the Neanderthal at times. I like how we used to be able to do it because we had so much more control. But obviously, part of the digital future is very much giving over control to to Google and to the different platforms. So so it's changed over the years, but many different things you can test. There's also different ad extensions that you can try and test as well. So make sure you're always testing those. And over periods, we used to have it set up on a monthly to go in and check for clients, where we'd look at all the different site links. We'd see which ones are working well, which ones aren't, and then we would remove some of the ones that aren't working so well and create new ones off the back of the ones that have won in over the previous month or previous period. Again, it all just comes into that whole cycle of just continually improving and trying to capitalize on the compounding effect.
Yeah. And I think a key mistake that we see that people make is testing too many things. Well, there's 2 actually. There's testing too many things, and I don't know what the technical term is, but testing bias, and I'll explain that in a minute. So testing too many things is if someone was managing it manually or they were reviewing an account, they might say there's this version of ad copy and that version, but everything about that ad copy is different. So the headline, the description, the second headline, and then they're comparing that with one that's completely different. And then they run a test and go, okay, that one's one. And then they do another one and they're doing it all completely different. Whereas the really good testing only tests one element. It might even test just one word in the copy, because it's like when you're working out or doing a diet. If you change too many things at once, you don't know what's making the difference. This is a big problem in science. And if you suddenly start taking 6 supplements and you go, oh, I feel a bit better. So which of the supplements, if you're taking 6 and you weren't taking any before, have actually made the difference? And that's the scientific method that we try and apply. Now, when it comes to this bias to what works, what was always a problem and still is with the AI, although it's a bit more of a black box, is if Google starts seeing in Google Ads, and it's same in Meta, if one of the variants of whatever you're testing starts to win, then it will start allocating more budget during the test to that, because it goes, hey, this is a winner. But back to your point of having a fair test, really you want 50% of the traffic to go to one, 50% to the other. Otherwise, you're not ever going to know. And what people do is they might end a test too early and start biasing to one that's just starting to tip a certain way without running it through its full cycle. So that's definitely a mistake that we've seen quite often. I
couldn't agree with you more there, Chris. Yeah, and also, obviously, we're experts in this field. There's only so much data, even in the olden days, that you could kind of get out of Google. So what we would do at the nuts and bolts level is, maybe we've been running a test over, say, 50 different ad groups in 4 different campaigns, and we've got all this data, maybe let's just say 10,000 different kind of clicks. But once we'd amalgamated it all up across the different ad copy variants, we would always add an extra column, and that was for conversions per impression, which you couldn't get out, and an actual kind of value per impression. Again, kind of comes back to what you're saying there about focusing on the right thing. Yeah. Google obviously wants to make a lot of money, so it's happy to keep, as you're saying, putting that swingometer into what is essentially gaining the most clicks, not necessarily gaining, what is a valuable action for the businesses that we serve across the country and the world.
Can we just double click on that conversions per impression? Because that's a key element of, if you could just explain it maybe to a bit more of a lay audience, what we mean by that, and the fact that it's not just whether people click on ads, it's not just whether people click on a landing page, but we are very much about click to close here, aren't we? So could you just walk us through an example of why that's so important?
Yeah, by all means. Obviously, we used to do that across like our entire suite of clients. So I guess without going into too much detail, but first of all, you have impressions at the very top, and it's going to go like a funnel or like a V shape, really. So you have all the impressions. You don't pay for those if you're on a cost per click. And then you have people who've clicked on your ad, and you pay for those.
The impressions are eyeballs, people who've seen the ad. At that point,
it's been displayed.
Not even clicked on
the
it.
Network.
They've driven past the billboard, but they haven't gone clicked on whatever's there. Yeah,
I haven't got a file of facts out and written it down. So exactly. So just impressions. So you've ads at least been served on, say, Google. Might not have been at first position. Could have been, all the way at the bottom. It was available to be seen. Then you've got clicks. So people have actually clicked into your site. Now that means you've been then charged for that click. Obviously, I'm not going to go into details about how you charge for the click, but that in itself is worth an hour call. So you've been charged. Now, then people will interact with the site. Some will browse. You'll have a certain percentage which will then do a meaningful action. And for most of our clients, that's either a lead that's been generated, so filled out a form, made a call, or for obviously our e-commerce clients, generally just a sale. Someone's actually purchased something, cash has been transacted. So out of all of that, what Google is really most interested in is just the clicks, because that generates them the money.
Yes.
They're not overly bothered about the impressions. They just want the clicks. And that's why one of your elements for your quality score is click-through rate. They want to be sure if they're serving your ads, you're going to be getting a click. Everything in Google's interest is to get more clicks. So as you mentioned, it skews over currently to just getting clicks. Now, because what we do for our clients is we generate them better returns for investment, then we're more interested almost at the bottom of that V shape, which is the money and the kind of cash transacted. So to lay it on its side slightly, what we were looking at it as just one other column as we added, and we added others, but was how much money was generated at the bottom of the V for how many impressions. So, if you were served an impression, then was that the best metric for you? And we found, over time, over 6 month, 12 month periods, optimizing to that as being one of the key factors, was one of the areas to really excel growth for clients.
Yeah, and it's something we still do. It's as you rightly say, Google makes enough money, and that's all they care about. That's all account managers care about. Yeah. But it's what's happening at the very beginning and what's the influences to the very end. That's true digital marketing, and we can take that a step further. So, to give an example from one of the industries where we've worked in, we've got a client who are like We Buy Any Car, but they're not. And the key thing there is, as you said earlier, understanding your audience and what their motivations are. Now, in terms of generating leads, so they want value, what they call valuation leads. They want people to get a value for their vehicle. That is a lead. Okay. But they don't make any money just by people putting their number plate in and then them telling how much the vehicle is worth. The way they actually make money, and that's a lead at that point, isn't it? They've put, you want to sell your vehicle, you put your registration in, they say this is worth £6,000, and that's a lead to them. But what makes the money goes even further than that. And that is, what's the advert they saw and the keyword they used that then made them get a valuation and then critically actually sell their car to them. And that, when we did this kind of analysis and continue to do it, had a very different testing regime and metric to just getting leads. And that is about understanding the motivations and the buyer behavior of the people who work with you. So getting leads is very different to getting the back end conversion. And we found that actually some of the costs on the front end, if you'd only focused on Google's metric, you might have said, oh, these costs per click are too high, or these costs per conversion are too high. But when you look at cost per acquisition, in their case, acquiring a vehicle, you have to look all the way across the chain to understand what works and what doesn't. And this is the reason I'm reminded of it is it's an extreme example of where what looked good if you were just one of those vanity metrics, how many impressions can we get, or how many even leads can we get, versus how much business are we doing, very different. And that's why testing happens all the way along the chain, but it's important to look at the context across the whole chain.
Absolutely. And again, it all comes down to accurate conversion tracking. If you don't have accurate conversion tracking and you don't know your numbers, then it's just a real recipe for disaster. Reminds me of the really large audio seller that were the clients, and the big expensive kind of Bose headphones and stuff, turn over huge numbers, weren't they? But actually it was us, it was yourself who kind of dug into the details on that to work out that actually, although it was adding so much to turnover for them, the profitability on each item was really, really low. So again, being able to add that extra layer of value to the clients because they just weren't aware of it from their side. So
it's about going, the devil's in the detail, isn't it? It's about going that extra mile. Okay. So I think a good way to sum up about why we believe always be testing it is a key thing to be doing is that there's certain tips and tricks that we'd like people to take away or things to understand. So I've already alluded to not testing too many things at once. That's definitely an area. If you're testing too many things along the chain, you're not going to know what works, and therefore you're just in a muddle of data.
We'll just quickly jump in there, if you will. So the whole reason to have a test is because you're trying to do something. So just first of all, know what you're testing and why you're testing it.
Prove a hypothesis.
Yeah. Because otherwise, we'll change the color of the button to blue, but why? So yes, it makes sure you definitely know what you're testing and why. So yeah, I agree with that.
And then another thing is that because, I mean, you can be spending, some people will be spending £1,000 a month on ads. Some people will be spending £1,000 an hour on ads and more. What would you say about needing to have to, if you want to get a big result, you have to make big changes, don't you? What would you say about that?
Yeah, it kind of flies a little bit in the face of what we just previously said, so I don't want to contradict it too badly. But first of all, obviously, don't test too many things. Make sure you know what you're testing and why, and do small tests. They're hugely valuable. But also, if you want big results, then sometimes you do just have to make big changes. Okay, every now and then, try and rewrite the book. If you were doing it all today from scratch, what would it look like? And if that's different to what you currently got, and you honestly believe that this new test could work for once you're doing your research and you know your customers, etc., then yeah, test it, trial it, see if it works. Because if you want big results, sometimes you just need to put your big boy pants on and do some big tests.
Yeah, it's a good point. It might seem paradoxical, but that's why you've got to take a step back from just doing the clicking about in Google Ads or Meta or whatever, and actually say, what's the strategy here? What's the business objectives? What are we trying to achieve? And that's the key differentiator between just, an in-house team or a lower level agency just clicking about and trying to improve vanity metrics versus strategically looking at the whole piece. I think the final thing to say is that just because we've got this always be testing mentality, which is true, and we're always doing that, it doesn't mean that everything is to be tested all the time. You should be always testing something, but at some points things just aren't testable. The budget's too low. There's too many different products and the keywords there's too many variants. They're not getting enough impressions. So really that's about focusing in on the right things and testing the right things within the resources and budgets you have, or, working with a partner who can integrate with you and take some of that burden off you and suggest some ideas, and always having that fresh approach. What we've wanted to cover today is to have the principles of testing and why we do it. We could easily do an episode on every single one of these elements and more, but I think that's a great overview. So thanks for your time today and your expertise, and we'll see you on another podcast soon.
Thank you very much. Take care.